Big news for investors in Luckin Coffee. This is really important. In this video I will go into this extraordinary general meeting that has been proposed by Luckin Coffee and what it means. Also, I will give you actually a timeline on where I think the NASDAQ hearing will be and what it means in connection to this news that we just got. And also, I will tell you a couple of scenarios that I have in mind and also how realistic I find each of the scenarios and what it means for you as an investor. So if you enjoy a good coffee in the morning or if you just like our videos, please smash the like button because that really helps us to grow the channel. Also, become a Patreon supporter if you find it very valuable. Thank you to all our supporters so far, and please, as always, share this information in Facebook groups or investor forums. That really helps us. So now let's just dive straight into it and see what is actually happening with this new general extraordinary meeting here. So I got hold of this notice here that Luckin Coffee is proposing that on the 5th of July they will be holding an extraordinary general meeting. So this extraordinary general meeting is about 5 resolutions on which the shareholders can vote upon, and it has to do with the removal of very important directors and also the chairman of the board. So here, namely, it will be about Zhengyao, David Hui and Arhai Liu, as well as Mr. Charles Zhengyao that will be removed from Luckin Coffee. Currently, the first 3 are directors of the company, and Lu Zhengyao, he is the chairman and the angel investor. He's like the key figure in Luckin Coffee. He's also one of the co-founders, so that's really quite material there. And then, regarding the discharge of Mr. Shao, it seems like the company waives any rights to have claims against him after he's been gone from the company. And then, resolutions 7 and 8 is about bringing new directors onto the company. So we've got Mrs. Ying Zheng as well as Mrs. Jie Yang, who will be appointed as new independent directors to the company, well, if it's been voted upon like that. The notice is interestingly signed by Mr. Lu Zhengyao, who is one of them who will then actually be removed from the company. So if you have watched my previous videos on Luckin Coffee, I link them here, then you know that I have been calling to remove Lu Zhengyao and also other parts of the company, and that's why I'm really excited about this notice now, because it's really showing that there is a cleanup happening in the background. And now the question is, what does it all mean? And also, what does it mean for the future of Luckin Coffee and the possibility of a delisting from NASDAQ? Well, for that, I think we first have to look at each of those characters and their parts, and also what's their role within the company and the connection between each other. So, who is running Luckin Coffee currently? So first of all, you see on the top Zhengyao, who is the current CEO, but he has previously been a director of the company. So he's currently only having this role since Zhengyao has been fired, who was the previous CEO, and now he is like on top of this chart in the leading role with Gang Wu. He's the Director and Vice President of Strategic Partnership and Supply Chain. Then we've got Hendrik Schakel, who is the CFO and the Chief Strategy Officer as well. And we've got Wenbao Cao, who's Director, Senior Vice President, Store Operations and Customer Service. And we had Jian Liu, who is the ex-COO. He also got fired because he was responsible for operations, including cost as well as revenues. So these have been the persons involved in operationally running the daily business of Luckin Coffee previously and nowadays. So it's interesting to see here who has what kind of incentives and what kind of a stake in the company. So if you look at who has been fired and has been responsible for the fraud, that's Jenny and Jian Liu. And Jenny, she is owning 20% of the company, whereas the COO, he was only holding stock options and not too many, honestly. Then we also have a new CEO and previously the director, which is Zhengyao, and he is owning a couple of share options here as well. And then we have those who have not a big stake in the company in terms of shareholding, and they also don't have many options, like Gang Wu, Hendrik Schakel, and Wenbao Cao. Now, before I'm explaining further what this means, let's have a look at the advisory board. Here we got the chairman Lu Zhengyao, who is holding about 30% of the company. We've got the director David Hui, who is owning around 12% of the company, and we've got Hai Liu, who is director and is owning 7.72% of the company. So Hai and David are quite important because they are big persons in the venture capital scene in China. They are investing in lots of different startups. Hai Liu, he is part of Joy Capital, and David, he's part of Centurium Capital. So they're holding quite a big stake in Luckin Coffee there. And then we've got those independent directors which are not holding a big stake, which is Tian Ruopu, which has actually already resigned, and Zhengyao, who is also part of this notice that he's going to get rid of this company, and Wai Yuanchong, who is also independent director and also zero stake in the company. So what is now interesting about those three big players that are having a large stake in Luckin Coffee is that they have been allegedly also been part in selling off of company shares in previous ventures, namely in UCAR and about some subsidiaries of Car Inc. and Hong Kong listed stocks, in which this golden triangle in the past has actually also sold off their majority stakes in this company, cashing out before the stock price collapsed. So this was actually part of the allegations of the anonymous Muddy Waters short seller report and outlined directly. So you can see that those three have been business partners in the past, and they have been kind of involved in a story which wasn't ending nice for the shareholders. But the story doesn't end here, because if we are looking at the operational side of those past stories, we see that Lu Zhengyao, he was the chairman of the board and the chief executive officer of UCAR Inc. before, and his assistant was Jin Yiguo, and the COO of those companies were Zhi Yaqian and Jian Liu, the COO that just got fired from Luckin Coffee. He had senior roles in those companies. So that means the golden triangle, the advisors, as well as mostly those that have been operationally active in Luckin Coffee that had key roles, also key roles in the fraud. So that's why I'm calling them the fraud team. They had previous personal connections. They have been working before, and as I mentioned before, that's what Muddy Waters also revealed. They have been acting in a strange way in the past as well. And that's exactly why in my previous video I said that this is kind of the inner circle between Lu Zhengyao, and that it is connected to the previous fraud, and I want him to be gone from Luckin Coffee if the management really makes substantial changes. And I also would like not to see the current CEO taking it forward and remaining with Luckin Coffee, because he has also been part of the inner circle. And now with this notice, we see that parts of the advisory board that is connected to Lu Zhengyao and Lu Zhengyao himself are now also at the stakes of being removed from Luckin Coffee, which I think is great. It's good news, and this should hopefully happen, because that would be great in terms of a cleanup of Luckin Coffee. We also see that the operational side has been cleaned up already, with CEO fired, COO fired, so that's been done already. And now the next step, which I was worried about, will this really happen? Because, such important shareholders of the company, it's not easy to remove them. Will they actually go and do this step and get them removed? So let's look at who would actually be left in this company. It's actually Gang Wu, Hendrik Schakel, and Wenbao Cao on the operations side, and all of them have not a big stake in the company, which is good, because I think that in the past they also didn't have any incentives to be part of the fraud. And I think a key person here to watch is Hendrik Schakel, because I think he's the only one as the chief strategy officer who can now go out and pitch NASDAQ with a compliance plan and possibly make this cleanup complete and turn around Luckin Coffee. I think he is the key person to watch, and he could be the one to be doing it, maybe aside with those two others remaining operationally active in the company. And we also see that we still have one independent director which has no stake in the company, which seems to be remaining, at least he's not part of the notice, and we will possibly get two more independent advisors on the board. So that might be the new setup for Luckin Coffee. So why is Luckin Coffee issuing this notice of possibly removing those important directors and advisors? Well, I think they possibly didn't have any choice. So now the Chinese government or local authority investigation seems to be finished according to Sina Finance, and possibly they found evidence that Lu Zhengyao instructed those parts of the circle to commit this fraud. So he possibly may even go to jail. He already lost lots of his stakes in the company because there was this collateral secured margin loan that he defaulted. And also the CEO, Zhengyao, she was also part of losing shares because this collateral was successfully sold onto the markets and possibly went into the pockets of us retail investors at a cheap price. So with this meeting, what is exactly going on? How sure it is that actually the shareholders will be voting upon getting them removed from the company? I don't know if it can be successful and if it really will be happening. However, it's really nice to see this notice because it seems like there are the good forces in brackets are really starting to fight against it. And I think it's possibly Reinout Schakel who is cleaning things up here with the help of the auditors and the law firms that they have hired. What does it mean for the directors which are possibly getting removed? I don't know, maybe it's a way for them to get away somehow without too many consequences. On the other hand, I could imagine that because it's such an important topic that we are even speaking about a general delisting of Chinese companies boosted by this scandal. And so I do think that even the Chinese government has a big interest. We heard about, I think, Liu He, who was saying they are taking this very, very serious, and that's a big guy. We can be sure that the Chinese government should actually have an interest in cleaning things up here. However, what will be the actual outcomes, we don't know. It's all still speculation for now, but the signs that we're seeing here are actually going into the right direction. So what does it mean for the next couple of days and weeks in Luckin Coffee, and also what are a couple of scenarios that are now possible for Luckin? So I came up with 4 scenarios that I'll walk you through, and also a possible timeline and a time for a date where I think the NASDAQ delisting hearing will be. So let's dive into that. Well, the first option is still bankruptcy, and that could be that, well, maybe this is also a step that, just everybody resigns, like the pressure is becoming too big for everyone involved and they just want to, default, say they're going to be insolvent and, well, they're going to get delisted from NASDAQ. Currently, I would give this scenario a 20% of likelihood, and of course, the implications would be a share price of 0. The company would go bust. The second scenario could still be that fraud wins. What if the fraud team and the golden triangle actually stays on the board? Maybe they get not voted out. Maybe they find a way to stay as advisors and directors. And then I do think that the NASDAQ delisting is very likely. I think there is no way that the hearing committee will agree to keep them listed. And I think the chances for this scenario are actually 20%. And I think it would imply a stock price of 0 to actually $5 a share, because nobody will give them new money and capital. They wouldn't regain any trust or confidence by investors. So I do think that would be quite negative news. The scenario 3 that I'm seeing is a retreat of Luckin Coffee, so that they say, well, we possibly have no way of really fighting the delisting, and, well, the fraud team and the golden triangle may be gone, so maybe they get removed from the company, but maybe also the CFO, who is currently not involved in the fraud, he also resigns because maybe the personal pressure for him is too high, or he just doesn't want to stay on this company personally and has any interest in continuing. And maybe the CEO stays, who I see as a part of the fraud team because he's got just too strong connections with Zhengyao, and, well, maybe they get a new board of directors. But yeah, NASDAQ, the hearing committee, I think they would decide to delist the company, and then I think the stock price once again would be 0 to $5 a share, possibly delisted, so lots of pressure on the share price here. Also, no confidence regained, and thereby nobody will like to invest in Luckin Coffee from the West any further. So chances for this scenario, I would give it 20%. And then this is, of course, my optimistic scenario, and also the one that I would prefer, which would be the Luckin Coffee restart, in which the current news, I see it as a kind of a hint that they are working towards it. And that means that the fraud team and the golden triangle is gone. They get voted out, and the CFO is the one who takes over. He will pitch a compliance plan to NASDAQ. And we also will see a new CEO taking over, because we really need also this position to be cleaned up for the hearing. And then also a new board of directors, obviously. And then I do think there is a likelihood that the NASDAQ hearing committee would also say that, well, yes, we see a good compliance plan here, and it's actually being executed, as we can see of those important involved people are getting voted out. And also we see that in the future Luckin Coffee can regain the confidence of the investors and staying compliant with NASDAQ rules. So that way it may even stay listed, although it's also still having a likelihood that it's getting delisted. However, still with the option of getting a second listing, because it's obviously also possible to list at NASDAQ once again, or going to another exchange. Nowadays it's really popular for Chinese stocks to go to Hong Kong and listing there, so that might be an option for Luckin Coffee in the future. And this scenario, I would even give it now 40%, so it's, you know, still not super realistic, but it's for me the most likely scenario that it's going to happen. And I think it would imply a share price of above $5 a share. Just look at my previous videos about how I rate the fundamentals of the companies, because in a nutshell, I think Luckin Coffee would have enough money in the banks to continue. Also, they would regain confidence with investors, so in the future they may be able to raise new rounds. And the CFO and CSO, Reinout Schakel, he could pitch or come up with a new prospectus for Luckin Coffee investors in general that is outlining a new strategy for the company, a new way of tackling the markets, and maybe going a little bit more conservative and slower in general. So what is the timeline for this extraordinary meeting, and also connected to that, the delisting hearing of Luckin Coffee? Well, we see that on May 15th, Luckin Coffee received the actual delisting note from NASDAQ. And starting from this time, Luckin Coffee has 7 days in which they can actually file for getting a hearing with NASDAQ, which they did. So on May 19th, Luckin Coffee went out into the public and said that they're going to request a hearing with NASDAQ. And I think they have requested it by the 22nd of May, because using those 7 days of grace period will give them additional time, because usually the hearing will be 30 to 45 days after this request has been filed. So now on June 15th, we got the news that the Chinese authorities have been finished the internal investigations, and that they found evidence of the fraud, also directly blaming Zhengyao, that they found emails about him instructing the fraud. So this investigation seems to be final now, and it only needs to get approval from some senior managers now, and also from the local authorities. So we could expect news on that very soon to be public. And then on July 5th, we will have this meeting, this extraordinary meeting with all of those implications that I just walked you through. And I do think on the 6th of July, one day after the meeting, there will be the NASDAQ hearing, because then they also can already bring the results of this voting or this meetup in general. And it's actually kind of the last day, if you count it, after the actual request has been sent. It may actually be a little bit too close. I'm not sure if they actually have the hearing before that, and they say that, well, based on the NASDAQ hearing, we just are pitching the compliance plan, and then we say we will have this meeting in the future, or if they do it the other way around and first have the meeting and then pitch to NASDAQ. I'm not 100% sure how it's going to be. However, it could be actually one day after this extraordinary meeting. So all in all, I think this is super interesting, and it's the biggest news for you as Luckin Coffee shareholders out there currently. And I think the implications are very, very important. And as I mentioned, there are different scenarios now how it could progress. Actually, it might be quite interesting what is happening with Luckin share price next week, because as I've seen, it's around 40% of the float has been bought by short sellers. So there's a tremendous pressure on Luckin Coffee on each side. So of course the stock can go to zero. On the other hand, with any positive news, for instance, verified books or a positive NASDAQ hearing or something like that, all of the board members and the advisors are getting removed from Luckin Coffee, I think we could actually see tremendous changes in the share price. So for me right now, I still have my very tight stop loss with Luckin Coffee because I was just making a good return right now by jumping in like when it was very, very cheap and basically doubling down and thereby cost averaging down with my shares. So that went quite well so far, but it's still a super risky stock, and if you are not prepared to lose any money that you put in Luckin Coffee, you shouldn't be doing that as well. So as always, this is not investment advice. I'm just telling you what I know about this company and how I see it personally. Let me know in the comments, what do you think, and also what do you think about the scenarios that I've been outlining. I'm really curious to hearing that. Once again, please smash the like button. And also thank you to our Patreons supporting us. You really help us. If you support this channel, this really helps us a lot to create videos like that. And yeah, that's it for now. Thank you guys for watching and have a great weekend.